All right, y'all, welcome to one of my favorite happy places. Being out in the forest, out in the woods, in nature. We're going into that season, or we're in that season now, where Earth is starting to come alive. And this is a golden opportunity of sorts, not just for me personally, but for all of us who are exposed to this kind of blossoming of nature. But in any case, big shout out to everybody who's been following me on Tribe by Noir, those of you who've been tuning in consistently on a weekly basis, soaking in the information, and making the life changes you need to make. For those of you who are new, this is Tribe by Noir. I am Remsen Noir, head coach at Tribe by Noir. And everything that I do here, everything that I discuss, is all about deploying nutrition, training, and mindset techniques and strategies in order to achieve peak health, to live the life you really truly want to live and be in the body that allows you to do that. Whatever reaching peak health looks like for you. I'm here to provide the support and everything that I've learned in order to help you get there. This is what this is all about. I wanted to take some time out real quick to let y'all know that Tribe by Noir 3.0 has launched. This is the latest iteration with all the improvements, taking things on the platform to the next level. Not only do I provide training, diet plans, coaching calls, one-on-one coaching support, group coaching support, and all that, but I'm also offering community. Now, I do live streams for the public on a weekly basis, but that's not the only one. I also do member exclusive live streams. We go over meal planning. We get deep into training technique, how to maximize your training to get the goals that you want, right? We get pretty granular in those kind of streams. And it's a live call-in, right? So you can get on the voice chat, ask questions. We do a Q&A and all of that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of support and camaraderie and valuable information that you can use from day one. So if that's something that you're interested in getting into, you want to take it to the next level, you want to get deeper into Tribe by Noir, well, I left a link in the description of this video for you to go and tap in and get started. Now, you can sign up and become a community member. You can sign up for coaching, and you can sign up for coaching with your own personal diet and training plans, as well as weekly one-on-one coaching calls with me personally. All right. So definitely take some time to check that out. And moving forward, we're going to get into the upcoming live stream. All right, y'all, what's going on? Welcome to the Monday Night Raw. How's everybody doing? We got another good one tonight because we're going to be talking about something that honestly I can't talk about enough because it is a massive game changer, and it is allowed for me to guide a lot of people to success when it comes to weight loss and things like this. And weight loss is one of those things that the success rate is very low, right? So it's very important to get into that. And we're going to go over some numbers and go over just specifically how weight loss actually works, why it could either be very difficult or very easy, right? And it can even work in a very counterintuitive fashion to some degrees, right? So I'm going to explain why that is. But first off, my man Tyson, what's going on? Good to see you in here. Ella, welcome. We got my mama in here. Good to see y'all. And you know what? I've been on a roll with keeping it tight, keeping on time, keeping time, right? Being organized. So I'm gonna stick with that. I'm gonna stay to the schedule and keep it tight. Right? So let's talk about why The caloric deficit is not really the key to weight loss, right? Calories in, calories out. More calories equals more weight gain. Less calories means more weight loss, right? Because the human energy system is a thermogenic energy system. This is the common belief. But now, if it was really that simple, if everyone who was trying to lose weight, all they had to do was just eat less and they would just lose weight, well, then why is the success rate only 20% within the first year? According to the statistical data, uh, as far as weight loss is concerned, at least here in the US, the success rate is 20%, but that success rate is calculated according towards a person's ability to lose 10% of their weight, right? And keep it off for a year. 20%. But of course, as the years roll on, that weight can come right back on. Usually, at least half of it comes back on, right? So the success rate is much lower than 20%, right? But 20% is a more charitable number. Well, I mean, what's going on? We're not dumb, right? Just eat less, right? So, for example, um, if you go and you eat out at McDonald's and you eat, you have like two Big Macs and a side of fries, you want to lose weight. Instead of eating two Big Macs and a side of fries, just eat one Big Mac and a side of fries. That's it. You lose weight, right? What is the need for, you have people a keto diet, a carnivore diet, a high carb, whole food plant diet, and we got the sugar diet. You got all these different types of diets and things and gimmicks and whatnot that people got going on, right? To help people lose weight. You got juice fast and all this type of stuff, right? Raw vegan diet. You got all these different types of diets. What's with all the complications if it's just a matter of calories in, calories out? Right? Obviously, we're missing something here. And people will go back and forth with me and they argue with me. Oh, don't try to reinvent the wheel. It's just calories in, calories out. That's just the natural laws of thermogenics. Well, there's the first mistake, right? Because the assumption that the human energy system is a thermodynamic or thermogenic energy system is actually incorrect. The human energy system is a hormonal energy system. Just because there is thermogenesis that takes place within the human energy metabolism does not mean that it is a thermogenic energy system. That's not true, right? The fact that there is this whole science of endocrinology shows that, well, things are actually a lot more complicated. And we know because we got things like insulin, and we have things like glucagon. We've got things like leptin and ghrelin. We've got testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, cortisol, adrenaline, and all these different types of hormones. Well, they can raise the amount of calories that you burn. They can decrease the amount of calories that you burn. These hormones can determine whether you retain fat and drop muscle mass or lean mass, bone mass, or whether you just hold on to all of your lean mass and just drop water weight or these different types of things, right? You can drop 3 pounds of weight from day to day, right? Your weight, you can wake up tomorrow morning and your weight could be down 3 pounds. Does that mean you drop 3 pounds of fat? No, it doesn't mean that. So if you drop 3 pounds tomorrow, you wake up tomorrow, you step on the scale, and you're 3 pounds lighter. You say, "Oh wow, yes, I have a success of dropping 3 pounds." And then the next day, you're back up those same 3 pounds. They go, "Well, how did I drop and gain 3 pounds in one day? How's that possible?" It's because it's not fat mass necessarily, right? It can be partially fat mass, but not always. So we got to dive into the nuances of weight loss and debunking the whole calories in, calories out, the caloric deficit myth, right? And we have to get past this calories thing. And the reason why is because if we get it out of our head that weight loss is dependent on, food intake, how much we eat or how much we don't eat, If we just get rid of that idea and focus on the things that are more worthy of our attention, well, then we'll be much better off, right? It is very important to understand that any goal that you pursue to change your physiology, just understand that the target is a moving target all the time, right? Because the human body is always trying to adapt to whatever your most common habits are, right? So, for example, you're eating a certain amount of weight and that you're eating a certain amount of food and that maintains a certain weight. If you cut that caloric intake by 15%, well, how do you think your body's going to respond? Sure, you'll have some weight come off in the short term, but what happens is the longer you maintain that 15% deficit, what happens is your body responds by adjusting to that 15% deficit and reducing energy expenditure. Right? It's the same way your body handles a pay cut. If you take a pay cut of 15%, well, guess what's going to happen to your spending habits? Your spending habits are going to drop as well, right? You're going to tighten your budget. So if you have like a thing of like, oh, I'm gonna go on a daily caloric deficit of 500 calories, right? So you're like, well, I'm gonna eat 500 calories less. You can't really eat a calorie, but for the sake of conversation and language, we'll say eat calories, right? So you'll eat 500 less calories. Okay. And you may lose a pound or two. You may lose like a pound a week doing that, right? So you can go like a good 3, 4 pounds, a good 2, 3, 4 weeks dropping a pound a week. You could. You may not, but you could, right? And the reason why I say you may not is because you can cut that 500 calories and your weight not really move much on the scale because maybe you're engaged in your body's having an inflammatory response that causes a degree of edema where you're retaining more body water, right? And that can offset the number that you see on the scale. You could be dropping body fat. You could, maybe not, maybe, but it may not show up on the scale because of the water weight, right? That could happen, right? But whatever the case is, let's say you cut the 500 calories on a daily basis and you're losing a pound a week. Eventually, what happens is that pound a week, it stops. And it's like a half a pound a week and a quarter of a pound a week, and then no weight loss whatsoever. So, what do you do at that point? You cut another 500 calories. Let's say you cut another 500 calories. Now you've created a deficit of 1,000 calories in total. So what happens if it takes, let's say, 2,400 calories per day in order to maintain your body weight, and you've cut 500 and cut another 500. Now you're down 1,000 calories. So now you're eating 1,400 calories a day, right? Instead of 2,400 calories a day, right? That's the original number I said, right? 2,400. So basically, now your body has to work with 1,000 less calories, 1,400 calories. Okay. And let's say you do that, and then the weight starts coming off again, and you're back to 1 pound a week. But here's the difference: if you cut from 2,400 and you cut 500 and then bring it down to 1,900, well, the 1,900 calories a day versus 1,400 is very different. Very, very different. Now, let's say your BMR, your basal metabolic rate is in between 1,600 calories. Let's say 1,600 or something like this, right? And you cut down to 1,400. Now you're eating below your basal metabolic rate. Your basal metabolic rate is how many calories your body burns just to engage in its regular bodily functions for just your organs to work, right? Heart, lungs, all this type of stuff, etc. Right? When you put yourself in such a steep deficit for a prolonged period of time, this is a stressor on your body, right? It's kind of like, again, we go back to your income. You took a 15% cut. Let's say you took another 15% cut. How would your spending habits, how would you respond mentally, emotionally, physically? How would your lifestyle habits change if you took a total of 30% pay cut within a year? You saw a 30% decline in your income in 1 year. How would that affect you, right? If you had repairs that you had to get done around the house, let's say you had to repair your microwave, or you had to repair your dishwasher, or you had to repair like your toilet or your bathtub or something like this, or you wanted to hire someone to clean out your gutters or whatever the case is, right? You just have to do some basic maintenance. Well, do you have the budget for that now, taking that 30% hit? With that 30% hit, you're gonna have to sacrifice things in order to maintain, so that you're able to pay all your bills on time and be able to maintain all the most necessary things to your life. You're gonna have to make sacrifices. So what do you cut out? You can't afford to make upgrades. You just took a 30% hit. And you took this 30% hit, and there's no time frame to determine whether or not you're going to start making more money again. You just took a 30% hit, and for all intents and purposes, you don't see any time in the future where your income is going to increase again. You hope it will, but you don't know if it's ever going to increase again. You don't know, right? How do you think that would affect your sleep at night? Let's say if you wanted to start a new business, you wanted to invest in your current business, you wanted to buy new equipment, you wanted to make upgrades to your living space, you wanted to go and hang out with friends, or just whatever the case is. You just wanted, energy to do other things, resources to do other things. Well, you can't really do those things though, right? You're at a bit of a deficit. You got to work with what you got. Now, when you take that 30% hit, you will constantly figure out, what can I cut and how can I preserve in order to slow down the bleeding, right? And then basically over time, you learn how to live with less. So the 30% is not so impactful. You've already made your sacrifices. You've already gotten rid of all the things you don't need, all the unnecessary expenditures, and you really tightened up your budget, and you got used to living at a new baseline of beans, right? Your body does the same exact thing. But here's the thing. You, as a person taking a 30% pay cut, you may cancel your Netflix, your Hulu, you may cancel your Amazon Prime. You may not buy new hardware around the house. You may not make new investments into your business. Whatever. You may hold off on all those things. There were certain loans you were going to take out, but the interest rates are kind of high, so you didn't all that stuff, right? So you're like, we're gonna table that. What does your body sacrifice? Does your body sacrifice bone mass? Does your body sacrifice muscle mass? Does your body sacrifice sleep quality? What does your body sacrifice? Right? As you sustain this steep caloric deficit, and by the way, if you live at that 1,400 pound, or that 1,400 calories a day, what happens when your weight loss goal is real big? You're down to 1,400 calories a day, but you've got another 80 pounds to lose, or you've got another 40 pounds to lose. What if the weight loss starts slowing down while you're maintaining this caloric deficit of 1,400 calories? What do you do to speed it back up? Do you exercise more? How much more do you exercise? Do you have the energy to continue to exercise with such little food intake? Do you have the food cravings? How are you sleeping at night? Is the stress of a lack of food getting to you mentally and emotionally? What's happening with the food cravings? How's your energy level? How much caffeine do you have to take in just to stay awake at work? This is the thing that we have to take into account when we're just talking about certain calories in, calories out, right? How does this affect the body over time? When it comes to weight loss, those who have a lot of weight to lose, well, it's going to take a long time. If you got to lose 100 pounds or 80 pounds or something like this, 60 pounds, it can take a whole year. It could take a whole year. So How often do you cut your food intake? How often do you do this calorie restriction thing? And how much do you cut? How deep do you cut within that year? How do you pace it? If you're at 1400, well, do you have another 500 calories to cut to bring it down to 900 calories a day? Or maybe just a solid 1200 calories a day? And how long does it take you to go from 1200 to 1000? Can your body withstand that? How little can you get away with eating until your hair starts falling out? Until you lose your menstrual cycle? Until your testosterone falls off a cliff and you feel unmotivated? No, and then you get erectile dysfunction. You wake up soft every morning. As a woman, you lose your cycle. You experience vaginal dryness. You lose your libido, right? You're battling food cravings. You don't have the energy to work out in the gym, so you start skipping days in the gym. This is what I'm talking about. When I say the whole calories in, calories out thing doesn't really particularly work, and why it's largely a myth, is because basically logistically, it's just not going to cut it. Now, you could just grind it out. And some people would argue me where they would say, well, what do you call starvation? Isn't it just a big calorie deficit? Well, when people starve, basically they lose weight because they're not eating. When people lose weight, they don't say, I want to starve the weight off, right? I want to starve. There's a big difference between weight loss and starvation, right? When people want to lose weight, they don't want to look like someone who's emaciated and sick with patches of hair coming out and you can see their ribs. Starvation is dying. That's not like a health goal, right? Losing excess body fat is supposed to be like a healthy pursuit. Starvation is not. That's a thing. It's called dying. Basically, in order to get to the point of starvation, your body has to lose the battle of resisting weight loss, because your body will resist weight loss. The more weight you lose, the more resistant to weight loss your body becomes. And the reason why is because really rapid, unending, constant weight loss is a thing that your body perceives as dying, right? Your body's just like, oh my God, we're losing a lot of weight here. Are we dying? Right? When you look at people who have terminal illnesses, they go through rapid weight loss because they're dying. So, people try to be slick and talk and, oh, what do you think starvation is? Starvation is not a calorie deficit. It's a state of dying. It's a different thing. All right. There's a very big difference between a person who looks healthy and they got visible abs and things like that. They're vascular and they're running a marathon and doing workouts in the gym versus a person who's starving to the point where they can barely walk because they're so emaciated. So it's not really the same thing. But I just had to get that out the way because I know people are going to mention something like that. So I'm going to talk about some hormones, right? And we have to talk about like hormonal balance and different things like this, right? Because hormonal balance is the thing that really the focus and the key really is hormonal balance. And the thing is that resource deprivation, food deprivation crushes your hormone balance. And there's a few reasons why, right? So we know that like you have this thing, basically you have blood sugar, and basically sugar is your body's primary source of energy. And then, so that's scientifically known as glucose. And then we have glycogen, which is stored glucose inside your cells, right? There's a beautiful thing that happens though when you maximize, let's say, skeletal muscle glycogen. When you fill your skeletal muscle glycogen, right, your body's well fed with this abundance of glucose stored inside your cells to use for energy. Your body positively responds to this by improving things like testosterone, balancing estrogen and progesterone, reducing cortisol, refilling your adrenal stores, right? Having more dopamine sensitivity, right? Greater production of serotonin, right? There's a reduction in something called sex hormone binding globulin, right? SHBG. So, for example, if you're struggling with low free testosterone or low total testosterone, when you increase those glycogen stores, you get greater testosterone. You get greater total testosterone and you get greater free testosterone, right? For women, it's a bit different, right? Your sex hormone binding globulin is basically you have this collapse of progesterone and this skyrocketing of estrogen, right? It's disproportionate. And the deeper you get into that, you start losing your menstrual cycle. It shows up late, it's shorter, and basically you can drive yourself into an early menopause, right? So when you're well fed, you can reverse that. You get a better balance of estrogen and progesterone, and your cortisol comes down, which modulates and regulates estrogen, right? If you constantly have your estrogen increasing, fat retention and fat production and storage also increases, right? Then you have something called thyroxine binding globulin, right? Your TBG. Basically, your estrogen can be high enough to the point where the higher your estrogen is, your body uses that estrogen molecule to create something called thyroxine binding globulin, which reduces free T3, which is your active thyroid hormone. So now your body's ability to use food for energy decreases so that when you eat, you feel lethargic, you feel brain fog, sluggishness, and all of this type of stuff, gassiness, bloating, etc. Right? Because you start having that thyroid, the hypothyroidism, right? Or hyperthyroidism. You start having these weird thyroid issues. And you can have low T3 and low T4, and your TSH is your thyroid stimulating hormone just going through the roof to try to compensate for the low thyroid hormone. So until your thyroid hormone comes up to a healthy level, your body will just your pituitary gland will keep cranking out that thyroid stimulating hormone, right? So your HPA axis, right, your hypothalamus, your pituitary, your adrenal glands are just kicking hard to try to bring those hormones back up. And what happens when all that's dialed up? What happens when that HPA axis is dialed up like that? You get this constant adrenal and cortisol output. This can lead to things like heart palpitations, restlessness, anxiety, and it gets worse as the day goes on. So whereas your cortisol is supposed to spike in the beginning of the day and trail off, you can have that whole curve inverted, where your cortisol peaks at night and you get restlessness at night, and it's really difficult to sleep at night. So you end up struggling to lose weight and you can't sleep at night, and poor sleep quality makes you more insulin resistant, right? And what happens when you become more insulin resistant? Your cells become less efficient at taking up glucose to use for energy, right? As this worsens, you can become pre-diabetic, you can become type 2 diabetic, you can develop fatty liver disease. Things really just start going off the rails as a result of this, right? There's all these different cascading effects and things that just go sideways as you get deeper and deeper into that caloric deficit and you sustain it for too long. And all of that because that calorie deficit was sustained for too long and it was too deep. So when people say calories in, calories out, well, there's a lot that goes into that, and people don't often talk about what I just explained. So if it's not about calories, then what is it about? How do we actually get the weight off, right? Because if eating less doesn't work, it works. It's in the very short term. But if eating less is not really the viable option, if that's not sustainable, well, then what do we do? What's interesting is one of the most fascinating things that I've learned about weight loss is if you have a person who is struggling with weight loss and they're chronically underfed, they barely eat, they maybe eat like 1 or 2 meals a day, right? And they're lethargic and tired all the time, right? And they're kinda sedentary. If you get that person and poor sleep quality, all the hormonal issues I just mentioned, if you get that person to gradually increase their food intake to the point where it's almost like they're trying to gain weight, guess what happens? They start losing weight. In a lot of cases, okay, and this depends. What I'm talking about is a person who is chronically underfed all the time. They don't know what it's like to really eat in abundance and be well fed. You take a person like that and you have them eat as if they're trying to gain weight, that'll actually stimulate more weight loss, right? One thing I often hear is I eat more now than I ever did before, and the weight didn't start coming off until I started eating more. I hear this all the time. And they're like, I don't understand. Why does this work? I don't get it. They have a hard time wrapping their head around it. In the beginning, they're like, this is too much food. I can't eat all this. I'm getting full. I'm like, just do what you can. Just eat to the best of your ability. Right? They're like, "There's so much food. I don't know how I'm gonna eat all this food. Are you sure this is gonna cause me to lose weight? Because I this is a lot of food. I don't know. I don't know how I'm gonna eat all this food. It's a lot." I was like, "Just trust me." And what happens is their capacity to eat more food increases, and as their capacity to eat more food increases, the weight on the scale starts to trend down. I've done this with diabetics too, right? It works very well actually with like type 2 diabetics. Now, the reason why is because if you give your body more resources, think about it as like imagine if you got a pay raise. Imagine you at your job, right? You went into work tomorrow and you heard the news you got a pay raise of 15%. And then they said in another 3 months, you're going to get another 15%. You'd be like, oh my God, you're going to raise my income 15%? You'd start thinking about all the things you can afford. Well, I got more money to invest. I can put more money into my Roth IRA. I can put more money into my investment accounts. I can put more money to the side to develop this business venture I got on the side. I can do repairs to the house, right? I can pay down some of these debts. You get excited and you feel better. That serotonin starts to increase. You get that nice little dopamine hit, right? You get a significant improvement in your mood straight across the board. You feel more secure. And then how does that translate to your sleep? You get better sleep quality, right? You start sleeping better at night and then you wake up earlier with more motivation to do stuff. You want to get up, you want to go for walks, you start meal prepping, you start looking, I want to go to a gym, right? You start stretching, you start doing yoga, you start doing more classes. Oh, I'm starting a new Pilates class. Oh, I'm doing a new boxing class. You just don't want to do more stuff. This is what happens. Your brain chemistry changes as your motivation increases. As the stress comes down, your motivation increases. The same thing for men, right? As that stress comes down, that libido comes back, those erections come back stronger, right? And free testosterone and total testosterone increases. That prostate shrinks, right? For some fellas, that's extremely important, right? Yeah, maintain that prostate health, right? That urine flow is a lot more effortless now, except for the morning wood. That's a different story, right? You gotta be careful with that. One thing that's very interesting too is fellas. Here's one thing that's very interesting. You get to a point where your weight goes up on the scale, but your body fat goes down. This is the thing a lot of guys experience when they do this because your ability to gain muscle mass increases. And so basically, when you eat, mainly, let's say more of a carbohydrate dominant diet, you get fuller muscle, right? And and men typically have like twice as much skeletal muscle mass as women. So you feel the impacts of this more. So that as a man, when you're real carved up and you're well fed, it really shows up in skeletal muscle mass. So you can experience an uptick in your weight, but your body fat percentage is the same. Your body fat percentage actually over time trends lower as you maintain that muscle fullness, right? So you can look leaner and feel much better even though your weight's up. Not much, only like a few pounds, not a whole lot. This is something to keep an eye out for because this will happen, right? So eating more, right? Eating as if you're trying to gain weight. I'm not saying everybody straight across the board would do that, right? Because I don't there are no magic bullets. It's all circumstantial. The people who respond the best to caloric deficits are the people who are used to overeating. The caloric deficit thing, eating less works for people who they just eating too much. They're going buck nasty with the eating. They're just eating all kind of stuff. Yeah, those people respond very well to eating less. But the people who've already been eating less, you don't respond very well to that at all. It's nothing but downside. Before you focus on how much you should eat, you should focus on what you eat. It's very important. And the reason why is because there is a distinction between causation and correlation. Eating less, or what they call a caloric deficit, is correlated to weight loss. It's not causal, it's correlated. You can say, hey, typically, when you eat less, you will drop weight. Typically, it's mathematically what you could expect. And that is what often happens in the short term, of course. It's not a perpetual thing. That's correlation, it's not causal. Eating less is not causing you to lose weight. Depends on what you're eating less of, right? So, like going back to the Big Mac thing, right? If you eat 2 Big Macs a day and then you basically go from eating 2 Big Macs a day to eating 1 Big Mac a day, you could experience weight loss from that. But it's not because you just simply ate 1 less Big Mac. You're just eating less in general. It's not really why. It's correlative, it's not causal. You're just intaking less Big Mac. Big Mac is an inflammatory food. I like using Big Macs as a thing. I don't know why. When I think of a food that generally people should avoid eating, I think Big Macs. I just say that. So yeah, like if you eat 1 less Big Mac, yeah, you can lose weight. Your body can respond positively to that because you're eating less toxins. You're eating less poison. You're eating, less inflammatory foods. It's got nothing to do with eating less. You're taking in less inflammatory foods. It's a food choice thing, not a food quantity thing. That's where the causation thing gets mixed up. Because if I drop a Big Mac and instead of eating Big Mac, let's say I cut out both Big Macs and I replace the same caloric value of those Big Macs with sweet potato, that would also yield weight loss. Even without cutting the caloric value, you just replace the food. So let's say, instead of eating 800 calories of Big Mac, you ate 800 calories of sweet potato. You can see improvement on the scale. You can see an improvement of your body composition just by changing the food. Nothing to do with eating less, right? The sweet potato is a less inflammatory food. It's easier on the digestive system. So basically, that would yield positive benefits. It's just specifically just making a different food choice, not eating less, just making a different choice. right? And you can see an improvement from that. Correlation versus causation, right? And you say, well, why is what's the food choice? What's the problem with the food choice? Certain foods create more waste than others. Certain foods create more acids and toxins than others, right? So, for example, if I eat grilled beef burgers, right? I get a bunch of ground beef and I grill it, right? I just grill them. And let's say I add some cheese on top or something like this. And I get like 1,000 calories of these beef burgers. Why is that inflammatory? Well, red meat increases something called homocysteine. Now, basically, homocysteine basically increases interstitial fluid. The reason why is because a food like this produces more acid, and therefore you need more interstitial fluid to cycle that acid and toxins out of your body through your kidneys. Right? Now, of course, if your kidneys are inflamed and basically you have a limited ability to excrete toxins out of your body, this can result in high blood pressure and edema, right? Especially if you're insulin resistant, right? That's more so like diabetics and things. This happens too often. So you get this increase in interstitial fluid, right? Because of that. The excess protein and saturated fat from the meat would contribute to that. And also, this also contributes to an increase in things called reactive oxygen species, right? Free radicals. You get an increase in uric acid. You get an increase in ammonia built up in the cells, right? All that excess protein produce waste, residue, residual, right? You get an increase in advanced glycation end products, right? AGEs for short. And these substances basically travel through your body, robbing your other cells of their electrons, causing damage, right? Literally aging you, causing cellular damage, oxidative stress, which causes an inflammatory response, increasing insulin resistance, blood pressure, edema, neuropathy. It can even cause gout, acid reflux, right? Things like this. Over time, you can have fatty liver disease, kidney disease, things like this, right? I mean, even in more severe cases, liver cirrhosis. Excess LDL, increase in triglycerides, elevated liver enzymes, etc. So the consequences of the food is because of that, right? The increase, the constant opening of your mTOR pathway leads to this constant growth impulse of protein synthesis, right? And this excess protein synthesis can feed things like cysts, polyps, cancerous tumors, etc., fibroids, right? Things like this. This can contribute to PCOS, right? All types of nastiness, endometriosis, right? Nasty stuff. Because that excess cellular growth, um, it's good until it isn't. Because whatever grows muscle tissue also grows anything else, cysts, tumors, polyps, etc. All that stuff is grown by the same things. So when you have the increase in oxidative stress, the increase in inflammation, and the increase in abundance of protein and saturated fat to make increases in lipoproteins, and you have these metabolic pathways that increase cellular multiplication, this is what you end up with, right? So over time, this can lead to things like diabetes. It can lead to fatty liver disease, chronic high blood pressure, atherosclerosis, kidney disease, etc. That's why you don't really want to eat too little. You don't really want to eat too much. Yes, it is possible to eat too much, but it depends on what you're eating. Too much would imply that the food in particular, the reason why it can be categorized as too much is because you're taking in too many toxic substances that are wreaking havoc on your body, like those grilled burgers, right? Things like grilling, frying, these really, really create the increase in those toxins. Right. So if you're used to having chronic inflammation, you've got gut dysbiosis, frequent gas, bloating, constipation, diabetes, high blood pressure, and you eat foods like that, you'll see your numbers run up big time in a very scary way because of the oxidative stress, right? That's just specifically about food choice. Now people will say, well, what about like what if you fry like plant-based foods? What if you bake or grill like certain plant-based foods? What about that? It's not as bad, but it's not that great either, right? Because the grilling still produces waste products, maybe not as much, but does to a degree. So your dietary strategy should be based on whatever your issues are and how bad they've gotten. Those with the most levels of oxidative stress and chronic illness should be the most strict on how they cook their food as well as what they eat. So, people ask me, "Hey, well, can I cook with olive oil?" I'm like, "You could, you probably shouldn't." "What about coconut oil?" Well, you could, but you probably shouldn't. Why is that? Well, because the oil breaks down into thermogenesis and basically that oil becomes rancid and rancid oil is toxic, right? I always liken it to taking the garbage in at night as opposed to taking it out at night. You don't want to oxidize the crap out of something and then swallow it. Generally not a good idea. The scientific community has a great understanding of this, and this is very well understood, which is the reason why whenever you get any kind of cooking oils and things like this, what do they come in? If they come in a glass bottle, it's a dark glass bottle, or it comes in a tin can, right? Because the oil is so sensitive to that breakdown in thermogenesis, and it can become rancid really quickly. That's why they keep them in dark bottles that limit light exposure. And they have a warning label, right? The warning label says keep in a cool, dry, dark place because too much heat and too much light will break down the fats, cause them to be rancid and toxic. And this really happens with fish oil, right? So when people ask me, "Oh, can I take fish oil?" You could, you probably shouldn't, right? That's what you have to look forward to with fats. So understand you have a like a high fat diet, eating a lot of fats, cooking fats. Just understand it's a lot of oxidative stress. And like a calorie deficit, the longer you sustain that habit, the worse it gets over time. So, calorie deficits, they usually work up front, right? So, you get the most results up front, and then the results kind of plateau very shortly after, and to the point where the longer you sustain it, it only just produces more and more negative outcomes. Same thing with a high fat diet. You start off losing weight real quick by cutting out all of your carbs, and then the weight loss flatlines, and then you get all the side effects that increase. So it's like benefit and downside, right? And then basically the benefit curves down like this, and the downside ticks up like this over time, right? It's like this V-shaped transformation. And I look at that and I go, "Ooh, not good." Okay. So food choice, number 1, make better food choices. What are the food choices? Well, the things I always talk about, right? If you have a diet where you're adding in more grapes, more watermelon, more citrus fruits, you're adding in more legumes, things like black beans, lentils, chickpeas, you're adding in things, let's say certain whole grains. Let's say like some of my favorites, basmati rice, rolled oats, quinoa, kasha, right? Things like this. Amaranth, um, kamut, which is like an ancient Egyptian short wheat. You don't need a whole lot of whole grains. I don't really make diet plans with a whole lot of whole grains. It's mostly fruit, right? So any of the cooked foods is in a minimal amount. So like for me, for example, right? Within a given day, I will have 3 ounces of basmati rice, 3 ounces of lentils, and those would be like the cooked foods. So I'll eat maybe like 6, maybe 9 ounces of cooked food in a day. Everything else pretty much is raw, right? So when I say high raw diet, that's what I mean. Now to be clear, when that 3 ounces of rice, when you cook the 3 ounces of rice, it will gain weight, it'll expand, and it'll become heavier. But that's because 'cause you've infused the rice with water in order to make it edible. So people say, "Oh, well, why do you measure the rice dry?" Well, because that's the actual weight of the rice. I'm not gonna count the water. In the same way, if you eat soup, you don't count the water as the contents as the caloric contents of the soup. You count you count the contents of the soup. That's not water, right? Fruit is 90% water, but like I don't count the dehydrated version of the fruit because it's naturally hydrated. Rice is not naturally hydrated. Neither are legumes. That's the difference. So just putting that disclaimer there to show you what I'm talking about when I say high raw. I don't eat much cooked food, right? Even like when it comes to my heaviest cooked food that I would probably eat, if I do eat a lot of cooked food, if the amount of cooked food I eat is like over 1 pound, it's because it's like from potato, like a sweet potato. So like I'll eat like 1 pound of sweet potato, like a full 16 ounces of sweet potato, right? As far as the cooked food is concerned. That's more of like a high um amount of cooked food for me. But when you're eating like, 4 to 6 or even 8 pounds of fruit in a day, well, it's still more of like a fruitarian diet. So when I say I follow a fruitarian diet, that's why I say that. I'm saying by weight. I'm not saying it by calories because it's a little distorted, right? Because you can have like an ounce of nuts that's more calorically dense than like a half a pound of certain fruits. Right. So that's why I say that. But in any case, when I say food choice, I really mean a diet that is mostly carbohydrate. So it majors in carbohydrates, minors in fats, and a fairly low amount of protein. So for example, if I had to compare the high end of my diet, which is carbohydrates, with the low end of my diet, which is protein. Well, actually, for me, I personally eat more protein than fat. My fat intake is actually lower than my protein intake. So for example, like me, I'll eat like maybe 60 grams of fat in a day. Carbohydrates is like 400 or 500 grams, right? So if I had to compare my carbohydrate and protein consumption, I would probably say I eat carbohydrates to protein at maybe like a 4-to-1 ratio on average. So for every 400 grams of carbs, I get like 100 grams of protein, something like that. Roughly, maybe a little more, a little less, but that's essentially kind of what it boils down to. And it varies from day to day. But like if I get like I can get like 120, 140 grams of protein in my diet, but that's incidentally. I'm not trying to do that. It's just incidentally. Um, so if I have 2 meals out of the day and one meal is 50 grams of protein and the other is 50 grams of protein, and then I'm accumulating protein in addition to that with all the other foods that I'm eating, like the fruits and things like that, it'll total out to being over 100 grams. So I say a carbohydrate dominant diet, but I put a caveat, and the caveat is a water rich carbohydrate dominant diet, right? Carbohydrates are produce the least waste, least amount of acid. It's just a cleaner food. Like you're not going to develop a whole bunch of ammonia and uric acid and lactic acid and creatinine and all of this type of stuff from carbohydrates. It's not going to happen because you don't have the excess cysteine, methionine, you know, things like that. You don't have these excess amino acids. Also, your high carbohydrate, water rich foods are a great vehicle for waste elimination. Right. So when you increase fiber and water intake, these two combine work together to basically create like a magnetic effect, pulling waste towards into the fiber, right? So that fiber and that water suck in waste and help to eliminate them from your body. Carbohydrates also are more vitamin C rich, B vitamin rich, and electrolyte rich, right? So more potassium, magnesium, not a whole lot of calcium, just enough, right? But mainly a lot of magnesium, a lot of potassium, right? Which is essential to staying hydrated. So typically, I'm all about risk reduction, right? So when I first start people out, it's a high carb, whole food, plant based diet. So we don't do the mock meats, the Beyond Burgers, and the chicken nuggets and all. I mean, we don't do all of that, right? The vegan cheeses and the vegan butters, and we don't do all of that. We're not eating imitation foods of meat and all. We're not doing that. We're not doing that. We're kinda bare bones with it, right? We're bare bones. Bananas, watermelon, cantaloupe, honeydew, grapes, oranges, grapefruit, pineapple, mangoes, sweet potato, lentils, like, whole foods. It's just a food in its base form, right? Single ingredient seasonings, curry, turmeric, right? Some taco seasoning, smoked paprika, chili, basil, parsley, nettle, little sea salt, coconut sugar, cayenne pepper, black pepper, white pepper. The most processed that we usually get is like nutritional yeast and maybe like powdered peanuts, right? Some cacao powder. But even then, these are single ingredient things. I'm a single ingredient person. I'm very minimalistic in my approach towards nutrition. But the goal behind doing that is not necessarily weight loss because when somebody's trying to lose weight, my first approach is not, hey, let's just do everything in service of losing weight. I don't start there. The reason why is because you have to address the underlying conditions as to why you're not, as to why you've gained the weight in the first place. What's causing the struggle with the weight in the first place? You have to address that. You can't just start hacking away, getting rid of the weight without really addressing why the weight is on your body in the first place. And predominantly, obesity is largely driven by stress, childhood trauma, um, things went sideways in your teenage years, and then just an overall very stressful lifestyle, and then poor eating habits. It's not just poor eating habits. It's usually not that because you can have people where they're skinny as a rail and they eat Chick-fil-A and all this crap every day and they don't have a weight problem, right? So it's not just the food. Poor food choices can make your health much worse, but it's not just the poor food choices in a vacuum. It's not really usually just that. It's more complicated. So, for me, I'm like, hey, you know what? We got to have a lifestyle that's conducive to improving your sleep quality and reducing stress. Right. So, we want to eliminate dehydration. We want to improve your gut health. We want to improve your insulin sensitivity. We want to make sure that you're well fed. And we want to get you on an exercise routine where we're basically improving the functionality of your nervous system and really reinforcing and strengthening your skeletal muscle and helping to grow that. That's the setup in the beginning. Right? In order to really have sustained weight loss, you have to build a really good foundation first, right? And then that foundation is the launch pad for sustained perpetual weight loss until you reach your ideal peak physique. Now you may say, "Oh, that seems like it's going to take a long time." It could. This idea that like, "Oh, we just rapidly lose the weight and keep it off," it's possible but highly unlikely, right? I'm not gonna take an approach with people that only works like 10% of the time, 5% of the time. I'm not doing that. Now you can do rapid weight loss, but that's not like you don't need an intricate plan to do that, right? You can fast for 14 days straight and lose a ton of weight. You can just not eat. You don't need a calorie deficit, just don't eat. You lose weight. But what we're talking about though is we're talking about losing weight, but like paired with wellness. Right? And I don't do this crash diet stuff where it's just like, hey, this is how you lose weight at warp speed. Ah, no, no. Because you can lose a whole bunch of weight really quickly and have a dope before and after picture, and then like next year, your weight's back right back where it was before. All right. Because you followed a plan. You didn't really understand the basis for why it works. But you followed the plan, you lost the weight. But what happens when you stop the plan? You can't keep that plan going forever. At some point in time, you have to stop. That's when the regaining of the weight starts happening, right? There has to be a transition period where you transition from one strategy to another, right? You got to know when to get off, right? Taking the train is good to get to where you got to go, but you don't want to stay on the train too long and miss your stop. You have a lot of people who stay on the train too long and miss their stop. So, on top of eating in abundance, being well fed, and having a high carb dominant diet, water rich diet, what else can we do? Specifically for the weight loss, because that's what y'all want to hear. Y'all like, all right, that's cool. Weight loss, we got it. I understand. But I got this weight to lose. Let's get to that. So let's talk about it. And I alluded to it earlier, which is don't eat, right? There is no such thing as a weight loss diet. That's not a thing. You don't eat to lose weight necessarily. You don't that's not. You can eat foods that make it easier to lose weight or that are you can eat foods that are correlated to weight loss, but it's not like a weight loss diet. You don't eat for the purpose of losing weight. It's not how that works, right? The human body is made out of carbon. The food when you eat food, you're just intaking more carbon. That's it. You're a carbon-based being, adding more carbon to your body every time you eat. If you wanna lose weight, you probably wanna reduce the amount of carbon stored inside your body. Right? So you don't eat to lose weight necessarily, it's not how that works. So I'm a big proponent of fasting, right? And I've talked about this numerous times where I talked about alternate day fasting, right? The most common thing is like intermittent fasting. Everybody does intermittent fasting to one degree or another, either intentionally or unintentionally. So, like, if you eat, let's say you finish eating at 7 o'clock, and then you go to bed at 10 o'clock, and you wake up tomorrow at like 7 o'clock, and then you eat again at 8 o'clock. Well, you fasted from 7 o'clock the day before to 8 o'clock in the morning the next day. That's a fast. That is intermittent fasting, right? You can intentionally do it where you're like, I'm gonna do 16-hour fast every day, and I'm gonna have
8-hour eating window every day. You could do that. That's more intentional intermittent fasting. And that could work and it's more sustainable. And you can do 16-8 without doing a caloric deficit at all. Now, you can lose weight from that. Is that the best way to do it for weight loss? No. The fasting window isn't long enough. That 16 hours is like the minimum amount of a fast in order to really leverage it as a fast, right? But the reason why I'm a big fan of fasting for weight loss is not just because, oh, well, you just eat less by proxy. It's not about eating less. Fasting is a way of detoxifying your body, eliminating excess protein composites from the body, right? And in leveraging autophagy as a vehicle to remove waste from your body to make room for your body to basically regenerate more of the useful stuff, right? It's kind of like if you have a piece of machinery and you got to fix it, what do you do with it first? There's a part that you have to put into the machine in order for the machine to work correctly. But what do you have to do first? You can't just take that part and just plug it in. That's not really how it works. Typically, what you would have to do is remove the broken part from the machine and then clean off the part of the machine that you're working on and then place in and attach the new part that does work, right? That's the order of operations. Remove the faulty part and then clean the area and then put in the new part. It's typically what has to happen, right? Same thing with the human body. It's very difficult for your body to go through this rejuvenation and regenerate when there's this muck. You got to remove the old busted stuff. You got to remove the damaged parts first, and you got to clean, right? And then you put in the new parts. Fasting is a vehicle to do that. Fasting is a way to heal from damage. Fasting also by proxy leads to more weight loss. However, yeah, so it's not a calories thing, it's a hormonal thing. Your body has a massive hormonal shift. Your body increases insulin sensitivity, your body increases adrenal output, your brain chemistry, everything changes, right? You get more increased dopamine sensitivity during a fast. It kind of sucks in the beginning, right? It's because you're like, oh man, where's the food? Oh, this is that blood sugar's dropping. There's no new food coming in. Oh, this is a grind. And then your body goes, oh, pivot. And then all these other processes start ramping up. And then you start to get more energy and you feel better and all this kind of stuff. And as you get deeper into the fast becomes easier because your body adapts. And when there's no food coming in, well, your body's metabolism still has to keep going. And the only thing that's really left to really use as an available source of energy primarily is going to be stored fat. Your body could break down protein, but that depends. What's to stop your body from breaking down protein and using that for energy as opposed to fat? Well, this is where a fast can be very beneficial or very harmful. If you are fasting, but from a position where your stress is real high, if your stress is real high and then you engage in a long term fast, that makes it even worse. That increases the likelihood of your body actually eating more of your lean mass and breaking down more of your protein as opposed to fat mass. Your body will use fat mass too, but your body will really eat into lean mass as well. If that lean mass becomes too metabolically expensive to maintain because the stress is so high. So my advice is really to bring down the stress first. If you're going to go into a fasting strategy, you want to start from a position of being well fed first. So as you're more well fed, you bring the stress down. And as that stress comes down and you're more well fed, when you do go into a fast, you have way more of a switch. If you're underfed and you go into a fast, there's not a whole lot of a difference between being underfed and going into a fast. But if you're well fed and you go into a fast, there's much more of a gap there. So the period of adaptation is more steep, therefore there's more benefit as a result. right? So there's more payoff for doing it. Now, of course, with a fast, the longer you do it, yeah, it can really start to backfire on you, especially if you're not good with stress management, right? So stress management is at the forefront of what you should be doing during a fast, right? And so this is where you would leverage things like hydration, herbs, certain supplements, things like this during a fast, right? So, for example, taurine is one of those supplements that's really big during a fast. Green tea, ginseng, matcha, these are really good herbs during a fast. Burdock root, these are really good things during a fast, right? And they can drive you into autophagy deeper, faster, right? Thus making the transitionary period, the adaptation faster. So you get to the goodies and the benefits of the fast faster with that kind of supplementation. Brings up your energy, makes the fast more sustainable, and it works to reduce the stress, right? Now, however, I don't recommend like, oh, you should just be cranking out 7-day fasts like every month. That's a little aggressive, right? Because the stress management, the longer the fast becomes, the harder it is to manage stress management. You can be good at the stress management, you can, but it's highly unlikely for most people. You got bills, maybe you got kids, you got all kind of responsibilities, you have pre-existing health conditions, things like that. Certain pre-existing health conditions, they kind of force you to fast. You don't have a choice. Just you have to. You don't have a choice. But that's not really what I'm speaking to at this point necessarily. We're talking strictly in weight loss terms. Typically, to go into all of the benefits and all of the cycles of a fast, it's got to be like around 36 hours, right? So your first 12 hours is phase one. Your second 12 hours is phase two. That's 24 hours. And then phase three is when you hit 36 hours. So every 12 hours, right, you transition to the next phase of the fast. So for me, I'm a very big proponent of having fasts in between 24 and 36 hours, right? In some cases, it's different. Some people they engage better with 3-day rolling fasts. Now, if you do like a 3-day rolling fast, where let's say every week you fast, let's say you fast, I don't know, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then you eat Monday through Thursday. For some people, it actually works very well. However, if you do something like that, it's going to be in the very short term. There's going to be a lot of weight loss doing that. That is very, very effective for weight loss. It's more risky because the stress management aspect of it, but it's very effective. It's not that sustainable. I wouldn't advise you to do it long term. I think if you're going to do something like that, you'd probably run something like that maybe like 4 weeks, 4 weeks at a time. If you have to lose like 100 pounds or something like that, well, then you can't really run that hard, right? I wouldn't do all that. If you got to lose like 100 pounds or something like that, maybe you can run it like 8, 12 weeks. But you got to take a break though, because the fasting, it's kind of you run out of steam a little bit, and the fasting becomes a stressor. That's the thing. Stress is very beneficial for improving your health, but acute stress, not chronic stress. So the stress has to be short-lived. It's to be strong doses of stress in a very small time frame, right? The greater the stress, the smaller the time frame has to be. Right? That's pretty much the rule. Long-term stress that accumulates over time will wreck you. So, like, eating less or aggressive fasting over the long term, it'll just be worse and worse. It will produce less and less results, right? Leads to injuries, depression, anxiety, gut dysbiosis, etc. Right? So you don't want to get greedy. So you can run like an alternate day fasting strategy, or you can run like a 3-day rolling fast strategy. And you can run that 4 weeks, 6 weeks, something like this. And within that time frame, you can drop like 20 pounds. You drop the 20 pounds, you got to know when to pivot out and then maintain your progress. Go back to being well fed. Yes, you will gain some of the weight back, but don't panic because a lot of it it's not going to be fat. It's going to be more water weight, which is fine. You're rehydrating your body. You hold and you maintain, right? Hold and maintain for another 6 weeks, 8 weeks, something like this, and then go back into your next phase. You could do it again, right? Again, it's great to ride the train to get to where you got to go, but you don't want to ride the train for too long and miss your stop. And I think I'm gonna leave it there. I'm gonna leave it there. Pretty much covered it. Let's catch up with y'all in these comments. All right, we got a lot of comments here. I went a little long, but I had a lot of stuff to cover. You said these are QTNA. How does the scale change from day to day? What is QTNA? What's that? How does the scale change from day to day? Water weight fluctuations, hydration levels, sleep quality, that kind of thing, inflammation. That's right. Tap that subscribe button. That's right. Like the stream, share the stream, all that fun stuff. Miss Anita, what's going on? You on the schedule? I gotta check to see if you're on there. How do you know if fruit alone is enough for the body to turn those nutrients into DHA? That's interesting. Will fruits alone turn nutrients into DHA? When you say turn those nutrients into DHA, what do you mean by that? DHA, pretty much your body uses omega-3 essential fatty acids and uses a portion of that. So omega-3 essential fatty acids is it breaks down into EPA, DHA, right? Plant-based foods mostly contain EPA, but your body will use a percentage of the EPA, a small amount of the EPA, and convert that into DHA. Most of the DHA that makes up your brain, you get that in the earlier years of your life, right? I think primarily it would be a good idea to supplement with DHA or take like some type of algae supplement, right? Which pretty much is a DHA supplement form of supplementation. But you would do that, let's say, if you develop some type of like nerve damage or brain damage or something like that, right? Like it could be beneficial for people who've had like strokes, for example, or some type of like blunt force trauma injury to the brain or something like this, right? It could be beneficial for something like that. All right. Oh, snap. You know, you're going to ruffle some feathers with the live stream topic. Yeah. Well, I mean, look, you know how I'll do. I'll go back and forth with people for a little bit if they disagree. But I mean, it is what it is. It's going to be very difficult to try to tell me that I'm wrong about the whole calorie deficit thing when the failure rate's so high. I wanted to ask for someone who suffers from gout attacks, not as much nowadays, but I still get that lurking feeling of it. What are foods I can eat or avoid so I can enjoy exercise more? Yeah, so your best bet is more of like a high raw diet where that saturated fat and protein intake is going to be a bit more limited, right? So you're not over consuming the protein, which leads to increases in purines and uric acid increases, right? So there's that. So basically, your protein intake and your fat intake should be a little bit more tight. So your fat intake would be somewhere like around anywhere from a half a gram to 1 gram of fat per kilogram of lean mass, generally speaking. And protein would be anywhere from like, let's say 1 to 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of lean mass. But the primary substrate for training performance and muscle growth is going to be carbs because of the glycogen and the signaling effects that it has to increase protein synthesis, decrease stress, and therefore increasing or decreasing myostatin. All right. So there's that. As far as reducing gout attacks, or that basically, in order to do that, you would have to decrease the uric acid buildup, right? It happens in your body. And that is where you would want to have a diet with foods that are rich in citric acid and malic acid, right? Foods that are rich in vitamin C, foods that are rich in B vitamins, potassium, water, things like that. Those things help to dissolve uric acid to more easily remove it from your body. The gout basically is a result of the uric acid solidifying, right? So gas, either the uric acid or basically any form of acid, takes on either a gaseous form, a liquid form, or a solid form. If it starts to take on a solid form, that's when the pain sets in. So you would have to convert that acid into a liquid or a gas form and eliminate it from the body. Okay. Tyson, appreciate you. I am very grateful for the wisdom today. Thank you. Absolutely. Appreciate you tuning in. All right. Yeah, I think I covered the DHA thing. DHA, I could actually talk more about that in another stream. Hello, Remsa. Do you think that oxalates present in some veggies could be a problem? Should we steam them? Best wishes. Not really. I haven't. So basically, like people, the only way that really oxalates from like leafy vegetables and things like that could become problematic is when you're dehydrated, right? So if you're dehydrated, you're more likely to have the oxalates crystallize, right? But if you're hydrated, well, they're less likely to add to crystallize. Pretty much like plants generally are going to have substantial levels of oxalate, right? And foods that are higher in things like vitamin C are much more likely to have higher concentrations of oxalates, right? So, for example, things like spinach or kiwis, very high in vitamin C, also high sources of oxalates, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that kiwis and spinach are going to be bad for like your joints or your kidneys and things like that, right? So that's what I would say about that. Oxalates aren't really particularly too much of an issue, right? At least I haven't seen any evidence for that. Oh, here we go, Miss D. Hi, Nicholas. I was bothered with gout, and my teas healed me through it. Turmeric, ginger, and burdock root. That's right. And that ginger turmeric, right? That pinch of cayenne pepper. Oh, yeah. And then that burdock root, either first thing in the morning or at night before bed. That burdock root is magic. I love that stuff. Let me tell you. It's one of my top favorites right there. That burdock root for acid elimination. Oh, yeah. That's the jam. What does a typical day look like to get your calories in? I have a hard time guessing how much fruit that is. Yeah, so and it varies for me day to day. I eat fruits pretty liberally, but like so I like to start off my mornings. I've been starting off my mornings with like 16 ounces of juice of like grapefruit and tangerines. Um, and then sometimes after that, shortly, I'll have some kind of melon. Like I may have a couple pounds of melon. And then I'll have like my oat pudding. I've been like I like doing overnight oat puddings, right? So I'll make like a cinnamon vanilla peanut butter like oat pudding, or a chocolate peanut butter oat pudding, where I just soak oats and then I throw it in the blender. I add some pea protein isolate, some powdered peanuts. I'll add coconut sugar, sea salt. I'll add cacao powder or cinnamon. Um, what else? I'll add hemp seeds to it, plant-based milk, and then just run it through the blender and store it in a jar, right? So that's typically what I do with that. And then after that, I'll have some more fruit. Probably have like 20, 24 ounces of grapes or something like this, or I'll have another couple pounds of watermelon or mangoes or just whatever kind of fruits I have, or I'll eat like a couple pounds of bananas. And then I'll have like my final meal, and that'll pretty much be like my rice and beans with greens or something like this. Right? Like after I get off of this stream, I'm actually gonna make like a salad, right? And I'm gonna basically mix like agave and honey mustard over the salad, where I'm gonna have greens, bell pepper, onion, um, and I'll probably add like some sunflower seed kernels to it, like an ounce of sunflower seed kernels to it, right? And I'll eat that. So that's how I'm living my life. That's how I'm putting it together. Do I eat tofu? Yes. I don't eat tofu most of the year, but like sometimes, like I got back into a little tofu kick because I kind of missed it. Um, so I put like I've been putting like around 6 ounces of tofu in my final meal today. That's what's really been pushing my protein intake up. Actually, I'm not eating the tofu specifically for the protein. The tofu is actually a good source of things like calcium, vitamin E, magnesium, zinc, things like that. That's mainly what I implement like the tofu for. But yeah, so basically the tofu could push me up from getting like 120 something grams of protein a day to like 140 something. So, but yeah, I like tofu. I like the texture, and I mix it in all my other foods. Because I like to take legumes and make a sauce out of them. So I'll take the like beans or whatever, and I'll put it in the blender with all the seasonings, and I'll puree it to make a sauce, and I'll put that over like other foods. You can put that over greens. You can eat it as a soup. You can put mushrooms in it and onions and whatnot in it. You can put chopped greens in it, nuts, all types of stuff, right? So you could do that. So it's very versatile. So basically, I'll puree the beans and whatnot, and I'll do a few of those. I'll batch cook them, and then I'll store them in the fridge in a mason jar. Right. So all my meal prep is in like jars. So I've been doing that. It's like super convenient. Do you believe in body types like endo, meso, and ectomorph, where some people naturally are heavier, more muscular, or skinnier? Do I believe in body types? Yeah, not so certain body types doesn't necessarily imply metabolism, right? So for example, like if you have like an endomorph tends to have like a wider bone structure as opposed to like ectomorphs, which are more narrow as far as their bone structure. So it's more so of like a clavicle width, hip width, and like bone thickness of your wrist, ankles, things like this. So it's a bone structure thing, right? But like having a heavier bone structure, you would just weigh more in general, but doesn't mean that like you're necessarily more prone to like gaining excess weight or being diabetic or something like this, right? This doesn't really work that way. So like an ectomorph doesn't naturally mean that like, oh, if you're an ectomorph, you're just going to naturally be more skinny. It's not really true. It's just that your frame is not as wide. So therefore you're not going to weigh as much. You can't really hang as much off your frame, right? So when it comes to like your musculature, you can have shorter origins and insertions. So you can have smaller muscle bellies as a result. And you can have shorter clavicles, more narrow hips, which reduce the likelihood of you like having like a thick, wide back, or big shoulders, or big glutes, and big quadriceps, like these big, meaty, girthy muscles and things like that. It's not necessarily the case. So yeah, body type is more so for like bone length, bone thickness, and origins and insertions of like muscle tissue, right? That's more so how I understand that. Oh, you said I missed the start, so I rewinded the beginning of the stream. Would you say that resistance training is a viable method to increasing metabolism? Yeah, so that's a whole nother thing, right? So another stream that I want to do is I want to talk about leveraging autophagy in the best way possible, right? So the two primary ways of triggering autophagy in your body is either going to be high intensity training or fasting, right? It's going to be one of the two. Um, so basically, the training is basically it does come with a lot of different metabolic benefits, right? But of course, you can't do it that much. That's the thing, right? Fasting, you can do a lot more than the resistance training. So, and the thing is that when you're going to leverage resistance training for autophagy, you got to make sure that you're not overdosing it, right? Because then it becomes more harmful than good because recovery takes longer. It's like a person who fasts too aggressively, right? You don't because you have to recover from fasts also. Like you have to refeed and everything like that. So that's something to consider also. So there's a bit of nuance when it comes when it comes to these type of things, right? And all of it really just comes down to stress management. But yeah, that's another thing I would talk about the metabolic effects of training and things. You give really good analogies. Yeah, I try to. Like I give a lot of like economic analogies, um, building analogies, and things like that. QTNA means questions that need answers. Oh, got you. I appreciate that. QTNA. I'm gonna have to implement that. I have to do QTNA streams or like shorts. QTNA part one. What's a good food base for children on the autistic scale? A good food base. What do you mean by a food base? I don't know what you mean by like a good food base. I don't know what you mean by that. As far as foods, they can be beneficial for people who are on the autistic scale. It depends on what kind of autism we're talking about, though, right? Like how severe is the autism? How functional is the person? Are you look? Do you mean foods as beneficial to like improve like mental focus, attention span, that kind of thing? I would a lot of the food that I advocate for, like, with the fruits and things like that, having more of a high carbohydrate dominant diet, more whole foods. I think generally speaking, that's better because it's less toxic on your body. Um, Improves better brain development and that kind of thing, right? So yeah, that's part of it as far as like for autism. However, I'm not really like a credible person on autism, right? So like I don't have the expertise and the knowledge base on autism. I don't work with autistic people very often. So I know some things about it, but I wouldn't say that like I'm an authority on it or somebody who they should be getting their advice from me on that on. Right. I have a lot to learn about something like that. So that's a bit out of my experience in my wheelhouse. Grams of fat per pound. Grams of fat per pound of what? How do we determine our fat again? Oh yeah, so it's grams per kilogram of lean mass, right? So anywhere from a half a gram to a gram of fat per kilogram of lean mass. I've heard from certain influencers that eating a high carb diet can lead to glycation and then ages. I bet it's like keto diet. People saying that because they fundamentally do not understand how ages works. Yeah, ages is a waste product, right? It's not doesn't come from carbs. It's not how that works. How much daily protein for weight loss and muscle gain? Well, I mean, it's gonna vary, right? I'd probably say anywhere from 1 gram to 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of lean mass. Magnesium malate makes me tired, but magnesium biglycinate gives me energy. Could you explain why that may be? So yeah, so magnesium malate does not pass the blood-brain barrier. So if you wanted to increase the magnesium going to your brain, then you would go with magnesium biglycinate because that does pass the blood-brain barrier. So that's why. Magnesium malate aids in like in like organ health, digestive health, that kind of thing. It's not really for like brain cognition and things like that. So magnesium malate can be beneficial in pretty much every other area of the human body except for, direct influences on brain chemistry because malic acid doesn't pass the magnesium malate doesn't pass the blood brain barrier. Oh, you said all scheduled? All right, there we go. That's right. Oh, you said, how is he getting 100 grams of protein? Yeah, like my last meal of the day is like nearly 60 grams of protein. I have two like high protein meals, and then the rest is kind of just like small amounts of protein that accumulate. But like, the when I eat melon in the morning, I mean, when I eat like cantaloupe or honeydew or watermelon or whatever the case is, that's like 10 grams of protein right there from the melon. If I eat like 24 ounces of grapes or something like that, that's like another what, 4 to 6 grams of protein. And then like with my oat pudding, my oat pudding. I mean, that's like another 50 grams of protein, maybe a little bit more. Because I add pea protein isolate to it. I add the pea protein isolate to it because it thickens it up a bit. If I do it without the pea protein isolate, it's a little thinner. Like, it's not as much like a pudding. I would have to add more oats to it, and the pea protein isolate is more cost effective, so that's why I do that. And then I add the powdered peanuts because I like the taste of the peanut, and I want to get that peanut flavor without adding peanut butter because I don't wanna add, like, a bunch of oil and nut butter and whatnot to my diet, right? I'd rather just eat whole nuts. So, in order to keep my fat intake in check, I do the powdered peanuts because it's less fat, and I still get the peanuttiness. So yeah, that's that. But my final meal of the day is like, what is it, like 1,200 calories or something like that? It's a pretty big meal, right? So there's that. So it's not that hard to get over 100 grams of protein. It's really not that hard. Oh, you said thank you for being honest. Yeah, I got to keep it real. Look, I'll acknowledge fully when I don't know things. I ain't gonna sit up here and act like I know everything. Mm-mm. Will a raw food diet help with what is that? How do you say it? Diastasis recti? I gotta look that up. Diastasis recti. Oh, that's interesting. I don't know because I don't even know what causes that. Like my understanding about diastasis recti is basically there's a separation in the middle of the abdominal wall. Now that could either be from birth or it could be from pregnancy, right? So like as your abdomen stretches, your erectus abdominis can create that separation from the stretching in the middle. I don't know if a raw diet can fix that though. I don't know. If it did, I don't know necessarily the mechanism for how it would fix that. That's interesting. And I mean, I'm speculating. I would have to do more research on this. But like, how would you close that gap? I would imagine you could probably close that gap if you can really increase. the activation of your transverse abdominis, which draws in your belly button and draws in your core, thus bringing both sides of your erectus abdominis closer together. And over time, it heals back and comes close. But I don't know for sure. I'm just speculating. I honestly don't know how that works. It's a good question. I don't know if you could fix that with diet as opposed to like maybe like a surgery or something. I'm not sure. Y'all be teaching me stuff too, because y'all bring up stuff and I'm like, what? What's that? I've been vegan for 10 years and gained 100 pounds, obviously not eating the best foods, overeating, and not prioritizing protein. It's not a thing about prioritizing protein. You don't necessarily need to prioritize protein to stay at a healthy weight. But like, yeah, I mean, this is why I say like simply not eating meat is not really going to be like, it's not all it takes, right? Because I mean, there's a lot of other things that you can eat that are not at all conducive to maintaining a healthy weight. But primarily, if you wanted to maintain a healthy weight, I would say that it's very important to be really good at stress management, right? Not overtraining, sleeping well, um, eating in abundance, um, staying hydrated, right? These different types of things, having more of like a balanced diet where you're hitting all of your important like vitamins, minerals, amino acids, having a diet rich in polyphenols, antioxidants, right? Things of this nature. And spending enough time outside. You don't even need to exercise that much. Like me, I train maybe 2, 3 times a week. I get a total of like 60 to 90 minutes of training a week. Most of my cardio is just walking. If I go for a run, it's because I just feel like it. And in the moment, I just feel like just going out for a run, but I don't do a whole lot, to be quite honest. You don't need to. In fact, if exercising too much can shorten your lifespan, right? There was like longevity studies that showed that like the more accomplished an Olympic athlete was, the shorter their life would be. Right? Like people who were like elite level athletes would actually like they would have quicker mortality. They would die at an earlier age than the mean, than like your average person. That's kind of heartbreaking to me. I'm like, damn, that's messed up. We said I'm in a caloric deficit now, but can't meet my protein goals. Well, it depends on what your protein goal is. You might have set your protein goal too high. Oh, this is interesting. Hold on, Sonia coming through with it. I've read that sulforaphane. I can't say that word at all. I know I messed that up. Sulforaphane rich foods like broccoli. Well, that's why, because I always just refer to it as sulfur. Like broccoli, microgreens are good for people on the spectrum. But in general, a diet high in fruit and vegetables with omega-3 fatty the omega-3 fatty acid thing I did here. The sulfur, I don't know how much of an effect that has on cognition and all of that type of stuff and behavioral patterns. I don't know how much of an effect sulfur has on that. But the omega-3 essential fatty acids, yeah. Look at that, good to know. Oh, hold on, what was this? Deep core exercises. Keep deep core exercises, honey for doctor, for DR. I guess the DR means doctor. Yeah, deep core exercises, meaning like the contraction of the transverse abdominis. I don't know if that's true though. I'm speculating when I say that. I don't know for sure. Oh, look at that. Sonia is the. Oh wait, Sonia, you have a medical background actually, right? Am I getting that right? You have a medical background. Melinda, I appreciate all the guidance. This is changing my life. I appreciate it. Appreciate you tuning in. Absolutely. He has food prep live streams going into great detail on how he does it. True. That's right. I put a lot of free information up here for y'all. You know what I'm saying? Every Monday night we be on here. Almost every Monday night. Sometimes there's exceptions. I gotta take the night off. All right. I think that about wraps it. It's time to dip, y'all. It's getting kind of late, and I don't want to break the streak. All right, we're running a little late tonight, but I had a lot of questions to get to. But I appreciate everybody tuning in. Y'all can actually book a call with me. You can book a consultation call with me. All right. So the link is in the description to book a call with me, or join the newsletter, or become a member. Right. So you can do either of those. Oh, here we go. AS, what's going on? Good to see you in here. I add chlorophyll to my matcha. Is it taking away from the nutrients in the matcha powder? I don't suspect that it is, but that's something I can look into. Like, what inhibits the antioxidant effects of matcha? That's a good question. Matcha is actually really good for matcha is really good for like metabolic health as well as brain chemistry, because matcha is a good source of L-theanine, which is good for attention span, mental focus, and things like that. So ginkgo, ginseng, matcha, green tea, white tea, black tea, and oolong tea, good sources of L-theanine. All right. So another fun tidbit there. So yeah, definitely. If y'all want to book a call with me one-on-one, full 60 minutes, hit the link in the description below to book a call with me. Pick the day and time that works best for you and your schedule. And we'll talk soon. And everybody have a good night. I'll catch y'all Monday night. And for those of you who are tribe members, I will catch you Thursday, right? This coming Thursday for that live stream, right? And that will be posted in the community also at tribebinoir.com. All right, everybody. Behave yourselves. Stay focused. I'll talk to you soon.